You are on craziest HOA moments. The tow hook was inches away. The reflective vest hit me in the chest before I even got my car door open. I looked up and there she was, Julie Kelly, standing in the middle of my snow-covered driveway with a handheld infrared thermometer aimed at my sidewalk like it was a radar gun. She was screaming about emergency protocols and city ordinances, her breath fogging in the February cold, and I had no idea what she was talking about. I had been on the road for 3 days closing a contract in Toronto, and I came home to Montreal to find a wall of frozen slush at the end of my driveway, courtesy of the city Plow, and Julie acting like I had personally shoveled it there myself. I am a medical device sales rep. I spend half my life driving between clinics and hospitals and the other half dealing with compliance paperwork that makes HOA rules look like a napkin sketch. I moved to the reserve at Wintergate Association because it was close to the highway and the dues were reasonable. The neighborhood is one of those developments where every driveway angle and mailbox height is in the covenants, and the committee micromanages shoveling like it is architecture. Julie Kelly is the rules enforcement chair, which means she has a clipboard, a camera, and a personal vendetta against anyone who makes her job harder by asking questions. She loves warning letters. She loves them so much she has a template. The problem started when I got back from my trip and found the plow berm blocking my driveway. It was a solid 3-foot wall of ice and gravel, the kind that takes an hour to move with a shovel and a lot of swearing. I was exhausted, my back hurt, and I had another client meeting in the morning. I figured I would clear it first thing, but Julie must have driven past at dawn, because by the time I got outside with my shovel, she was already standing there with her phone out taking pictures. She said, "You are in violation of Section 12-4, improper snow placement. You have until noon to remove it or you are looking at a $200 fine." I said, "I just got home. The plow left this here last night." She said, "The snow is on your property line. That makes it your responsibility. You do not get an opinion, you get a fine schedule." I tried to explain that I had not touched the snow yet, that I was about to clear it, but she cut me off and said the rules were the rules. She took another photo, turned on her heel, and walked back to her Lexus. The whole thing took maybe 90 seconds. I stood there in my brown puffer jacket and white beanie, holding a salt bag with the label turned away, watching her drive off, and I realized this was not going to be a normal winter. I cleared the berm. It took 90 minutes and my shoulder was screaming by the end, but I got it done. I figured that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 days later, I got an email from the HOA management company with a PDF attached. It was a violation notice. Not for the plow berm, which I had already cleared, but for failure to maintain a safe pedestrian path during a declared snow emergency. The fine was $500, and there was a note at the bottom that said continued non-compliance would result in amenities lockout and potential lien action. I read it twice. I had no idea what snow emergency she was talking about. I checked the city website, the county alerts, even the weather service. Nothing. No emergency declaration, no elevated status, just normal February snow. I called the management company and got a receptionist who said she would pass my question along to the board. I asked when I could expect a response. She said standard turnaround is 5 to 7 business days. I said, "The notice says I have 72 hours to pay or appeal." She said, "You can submit a written appeal, but it does not stop the clock on the fine." I hung up and stared at the email. The violation notice cited Section 18-2, subsection C, Emergency Weather Protocols. I pulled up the HOA covenants and conditions and restrictions, all 93 pages, and started reading. Section 18 dealt with winter maintenance, but subsection C was about homeowner responsibilities during association-declared emergencies, not city emergencies. The board had to vote and post notice. I checked the resident portal. No emergency declaration, no board vote, no notice. Julie had made it up. I had a problem. I was in the middle of a big contract, the kind that could set me up for the next 2 years if I did not screw it up, and distractions could cost me real money. I had client calls stacked back to back, a product demo in Burlington, and a family situation brewing because my sister needed help and winter weather meant delays were already stacking. I could not afford to spend hours fighting a fake snow emergency. But I also could not afford a $500 fine and a lien threat on my record when I had done nothing wrong. I decided to document everything. I took photos of my cleared driveway and sidewalk, screenshots of the city website showing no emergency declaration, and I sent a formal appeal to the management company with all of it attached. I kept it polite and factual. I said, I believe there has been a misunderstanding. There was no declared snow emergency on the cited dates, and I cleared the plow berm within 24 hours of returning home. I request the fine be rescinded and the violation removed from my account. I got a response 3 days later. It was from Julie, not the management company. She said, your appeal has been reviewed and denied. The association reserves the right to declare localized emergencies independent of city status. Your sidewalk was observed with ice accumulation on February 6th at 0700 hours, constituting a slip hazard under Section 18-2 subsection C. You will pay the fee, then you will pay the fee about the fee. I read that line twice. You will pay the fee, then you will pay the fee about the fee. It sounded like a threat and a punchline at the same time. I took a screenshot and saved it in a folder I was starting to call evidence. That same afternoon, I went outside to salt my front steps. The bag I was using was the same one I had been holding when Julie ambushed me earlier, a basic sidewalk dicer from the hardware store. I sprinkled it on the steps and the walkway, then went back inside to prep for a call. 20 minutes later, my doorbell camera alert went off. I checked the feed and saw Julie standing on my walkway with her phone out, filming my steps. She crouched down, touched the salt crystals with her gloved hand, then stood up and took a close-up photo of the bag I had left on the porch. The bag label was turned away, so she repositioned it, snapped another photo, then walked back to her car. I watched the footage 3 times. She was building a case. I did not know what the angle was yet, but she was documenting my steps like she was collecting evidence for a lawsuit. I saved the video file and added it to my folder. The next day, I got another email. This one was from the management company, but it was clearly written by Julie. It said, pursuant to Section 19-6, the use of unauthorized deicing agents is prohibited on common area adjacent surfaces. Approved products must be certified pet-safe and phosphate-free. Your recent application of non-approved dicer constitutes a secondary violation. Fine amount, $300. You have 48 hours to remediate and submit proof of approved product purchase. I looked at the bag on my porch. It was standard calcium chloride blend, the same stuff every hardware store in Montreal sells. I checked Section 19-6. It said homeowners were responsible for clearing walkways in a manner consistent with environmental and safety standards, and that the board could maintain a list of approved products. I checked the resident portal again. No list, no approved products, no standards posted anywhere. I called the management company again. This time I got a different receptionist. I said I need to see the list of approved deicing products referenced in my violation notice. She put me on hold for 4 minutes, then came back and said, I will submit a records request on your behalf. Standard turnaround is 10 to 14 business days. I said, the notice says I have 48 hours. She said, you can pay the fine and dispute it later, or you can wait for the records request and risk additional penalties for non-compliance. I said, so I am supposed to pay a fine for violating a rule that does not exist, or wait 2 weeks for proof that it does not exist, and either way I get penalized. She said, I am just relaying the process, sir. I hung up and added the email to my evidence folder. I was starting to see the pattern. Julie was not enforcing rules. She was inventing them, then using the slow bureaucracy of the management company to make it impossible to fight back in time. Every notice had a short deadline and a threat, but every appeal or records request took weeks. It was a system designed to extract fines, not to resolve disputes. I needed help. I remembered a guy I met at a neighborhood barbecue last summer, a city clerk named Mark, who lived 2 streets over. He had mentioned something about public records and HOA transparency laws when we were talking about property taxes. I did not know him well, but I figured it was worth a shot. I sent him a message through the neighborhood Facebook group and asked if he had a few minutes to talk about HOA records requests. He replied in 10 minutes and said, "Come by tonight, I have some things you should see." Mark lived in a townhouse near the back of the development, the kind with a tiny front porch and a shared driveway. When I got there, he was already waiting with a folder full of printed documents. He said, "I heard about Julie going after you. She did the same thing to me last year over a mailbox flag. I fought it and won, but it took 3 months and a complaint to the state." I said, "What did you do?" He said, "I filed a records request for the board meeting minutes where they supposedly approved the mailbox rule. Turns out, they never voted on it. Julie just added it to the violations list and started fining people. When I showed the management company the minutes, they pulled the fines and sent a correction email." He handed me a packet. It was a template records request form, a copy of the state HOA statute on records access, and a highlighted section that said homeowners had the right to inspect association documents within 10 business days of a written request, and that the association could charge reasonable copy fees but could not delay access as a punitive measure. I said, "Julie told me I had to wait 2 weeks and pay copy fees." Mark said, "She is lying. The law says 10 days and fees have to be actual costs, not punitive. If she tries to block you, file a complaint with the management company and CC the state attorney general office. They hate HOA records violations." I took the packet and thanked him. He said, "One more thing. If Julie is claiming an emergency declaration, make her prove it. Board votes have to be documented and posted. If she cannot produce the vote, the emergency does not exist, and the fines are void." I went home and drafted a formal records request. I asked for 3 things. 1. The board meeting minutes where the snow emergency was declared. 2. The list of approved deicking products referenced in Section 19-6. 3. Any written complaints or reports filed against my property in the last 90 days. I sent it to the management company and CC'd Julie and the board president. I kept the tone professional and cited the state statute Mark had given me. I said, "I am requesting these records pursuant to state law and expect access within 10 business days. Please confirm receipt and provide a timeline for compliance." I got a reply in 6 hours. It was from the management company, not Julie. It said, "Your records request has been received. Due to the volume of materials, we will require 30 business days to compile the requested documents. Copy fees will be assessed at 50 cents per page, prepayment required. Estimated cost, $240. I read it twice and felt my blood pressure spike. 30 days, $240. For 3 items that should take 10 minutes to pull from a shared drive. This was retaliation. I forwarded the email to Mark and said, "Is this legal?" He replied immediately, "No. File a complaint with the state. I will send you the form." I spent the next 2 hours filling out a state complaint form, attaching the management company email and the statute citation, and submitting it online. I did not know if it would do anything, but at least it was on record. I also sent a follow-up email to the management company and said, "I am filing a formal complaint regarding your records delay and excessive fees. State law requires 10-day access and reasonable costs. I expect compliance by the statutory deadline or I will pursue further action." I did not hear back. The next morning, I went outside to find two neighbors standing at the end of my driveway, whispering and holding salt buckets in hand. One of them, a guy named Tom, waved me over and said, "Did you hear what Julie is saying about you?" I said, "No." "What?" He said, "She posted in the neighborhood group chat that you are refusing to comply with snow emergency protocols and that the board is considering a lien. She said you are putting everyone at risk and that the association might have to take legal action." I pulled out my phone and opened the group chat. Sure enough, there was a post from Julie, time-stamped 40 minutes ago. It said, "Reminder to all residents, failure to maintain safe pedestrian access during declared emergencies is a violation of Section 18-2 and may result in fines, amenities lockout, and lien action. Recent noncompliance by several homeowners has forced the board to consider stricter enforcement. Please ensure your walkways are cleared within 12 hours of snowfall. Stay safe." It did not mention my name, but everyone knew who she was talking about. The post had 15 reactions and 6 comments, most of them supportive of Julie and asking who the non-compliant homeowners were. One person commented, "If you cannot handle the rules, move somewhere else." Tom said, "I know you cleared your driveway. I saw you out here. This is garbage." I said, "She is making things up. There was no emergency declaration. I have proof." He said, "You should post it in the chat." I thought about it. Part of me wanted to air everything right there, post the screenshots and the statute and the records request, but I knew that would just escalate things and make me look defensive. Julie controlled the narrative in that group. Anything I posted would get spun or buried. I needed a better move. I said, "I am working on it. Thanks for the heads up." Tom nodded and said, "Let me know if you need a witness for anything. I have doorbell footage of the plow dumping that berm. It is time-stamped." I felt a little spark of relief. I said, "Send me a copy. I might need it." He said, "Done." I went back inside and checked my evidence folder. I had the city website screenshots, the violation notices, the records request, the state complaint, the doorbell footage of Julie photographing my steps, and now Tom's plow footage. I also had Mark's advice and the statute citation. I was building a case, but I did not have the smoking gun yet. I needed something that proved Julie was acting outside her authority, something undeniable. I let her call my bluff, because she did not realize I was not bluffing. That same afternoon, I tried to access the neighborhood pool and fitness center to clear my head and make some calls in a quiet space. I scanned my key fob at the gate and got a red light. I tried again. Red light. I walked to the clubhouse and tried the front door. Same thing. I went to the management office window and knocked. The same receptionist from the phone calls slid the window open and said, "Can I help you?" I said, "My access is not working." She typed something into her computer and said, "Your amenities access has been suspended pending resolution of outstanding violations." I said, "I appealed those violations. They are in dispute." She said, "Appeals do not stop enforcement actions. You will need to resolve the fines or wait for the board hearing." I said, "When is the board hearing?" She said, "The next meeting is in 6 weeks." I felt my jaw tighten. I said, "So I am locked out of the amenities I pay dues for because of fines I am disputing, and I have to wait 6 weeks for a hearing." She said, "That is the policy." I said, "Show me the policy." She blinked and said, "I will have to get back to you on that." I said, "I want it in writing. Email me the section of the rules that allows you to lock out a homeowner without a hearing." She said, "I will pass your request along." I walked out before I said something I would regret. I sat in my car and pulled up the CC&Rs on my phone. I searched for amenities lockout. There was one mention in Section 23, and it said the board could suspend amenities access for homeowners with delinquent dues exceeding 90 days or for homeowners convicted of criminal activity on association property. Nothing about disputed fines, nothing about unresolved violations. Julie had made it up, and the management company went along with it. I added the lockout to my evidence folder and sent another email to the management company. I said, I was denied amenities access today without cause. Section 23 allows lockouts only for delinquent dues or criminal conduct. I have neither. I demand immediate restoration of access and a written explanation for this action. I got a reply 2 hours later from Julie. It said, amenities lockout is an enforcement tool available to the board under general authority granted in Section 4-1. Which allows the board to take reasonable actions to ensure compliance with community standards. Your access will be restored upon payment of outstanding fines or successful appeal. I looked up Section 4-1. It was a vague clause about board powers and duties. It said the board could adopt rules and take actions necessary to manage the association. It said nothing about locking people out. It was a catch-all that Julie was using to justify whatever she wanted. I was done being polite. I forwarded the email chain to Mark and said, I need to escalate this. What are my options? He replied, file a complaint with the management company board president, not just the manager. Demand a special hearing. If they refuse, you can file in small claims for dues reimbursement and wrongful lockout. Also, check if your HOA is subject to state dispute resolution. Some states require mediation before litigation. I looked up the board president. His name was Richard Colborne, and he lived in the same cluster as Julie. I did not know him personally, but I had seen him at annual meetings. He always sat next to Julie and nodded along while she talked. I did not have high hopes, but I drafted an email anyway. I said, I am writing to request an emergency board hearing regarding multiple violations notices I believe were issued in error and an amenities lockout that violates the CC&Rs. I have attached documentation, and I am requesting a hearing within 10 business days as allowed under state law. Please confirm receipt and provide available dates. I sent it and waited. No reply. 2 days later, I came home from a client meeting to find a notice taped to my front door. It was printed on HOA letterhead, and it said, Final warning, compliance required by February 14th or tow action will be initiated. I looked at my driveway. It was clear. I looked at my sidewalk. It was clear and salted. I looked at my mailbox, my trash cans, my porch. Everything was fine. I had no idea what she was talking about. I pulled out my phone and called the management company. I got voicemail. I left a message and said, I need an explanation for the final warning notice on my door. I am in full compliance. Call me back immediately. No one called back. That night, I checked the doorbell camera footage. At 11:30 a.m., while I was in Burlington doing a demo, Julie had parked in front of my house, walked up my driveway with a clipboard, and taken photos of my snow stakes. Snow stakes are those little reflective markers you put along your driveway edge so the plow does not tear up your lawn. I had 6 of them, spaced evenly, stuck in the snow at the edge of the pavement. They are sold at every hardware store. They are completely normal. Julie crouched down, grabbed one, yanked it out of the snow, and tossed it onto my lawn. Then she did the same with the second one. And the third. She pulled all 6 stakes, threw them in a pile on my lawn, took a photo of the pile, and walked back to her car. The whole thing took 3 minutes. The doorbell camera caught her hand doing it, clear as day. I saved the footage and sent it to Mark immediately. I said she just sabotaged my property and photographed the result. What do I do? He replied, that is vandalism and possibly trespassing. File a police report and send the footage to the management company and the board president. Do it tonight. I filed a police report online and attached the video. I also sent the footage to the management company, the board president, and Julie with a message that said, this footage shows you removing my property and staging a violation. I am filing a police report and I expect all fines and notices to be rescinded immediately. If this continues, I will pursue legal action for harassment and vandalism." I got a reply from Julie in 20 minutes. It said, "The stakes constitute unauthorized signage under Section 11-3 and were removed as a safety hazard. No vandalism occurred. Your complaint is frivolous and may result in additional fines for abuse of association resources." I looked up Section 11-3. It was about political signs and decorative flags. It said nothing about snow stakes. She was making things up again, but this time I had her on camera. The police report was assigned a case number, but no officer contacted me. I called the non-emergency line and was told that property disputes between neighbors were usually civil matters unless there was a credible threat or significant damage. The dispatcher said I could request a report copy for my records, but that an officer probably would not follow up unless the situation escalated. I thanked her and hung up. The case number was enough. It was documentation. I was running out of time. I had to leave for a family trip in 4 days because my sister needed help with my mom, and winter weather meant delays were already stacking. I could not afford to leave this mess unresolved and come back to a town notice or a lien. I needed to force a resolution before I left. I sent one more email to the board president and said, "I am requesting an emergency board hearing before February 15th. I have documented multiple false violations, wrongful amenities lockout, and vandalism by the rules enforcement chair. If I do not receive a hearing date within 48 hours, I will file a formal complaint with the State Attorney General and pursue legal remedies. Please respond immediately." I got a reply the next morning, not from the board president, but from the management company manager. It said, "The board has reviewed your complaints and determined that no emergency hearing is warranted. Your disputes will be addressed at the next regular meeting on March 28th. In the meantime, all enforcement actions remain in effect." March 28th. 6 weeks away. I would be gone, the fines would keep piling up, and Julie would keep escalating. I was being stonewalled. I called Mark and said, "They are refusing a hearing. What else can I do?" He said, "File in small claims. You can request an injunction to stop the fines and the lockout while the case is pending. It is fast, it is cheap, and it will force them to respond. Also, you should check if your HOA has a registered agent for service. If they do, you can serve them directly and skip the management company." I looked up the HOA registration with the state. The registered agent was the management company office. I could serve them in person. I spent the next 2 days drafting a small claims complaint. I kept it simple. I said the HOA had issued fines based on rules that did not exist, locked me out of amenities without authority, and engaged in harassment and retaliation when I requested records. I asked for reimbursement of all fines paid, restoration of amenities access, and a court order requiring the HOA to follow its own rules. I attached the evidence folder, the doorbell footage, the records request, the state complaint, and the email chain. The filing fee was $75. I filed it online on February 13th and printed the confirmation. I drove to the management company office and walked in with the court papers. The receptionist looked up and said, "Can I help you?" I said, "I need to serve these to your registered agent." She said, "What is this regarding?" I said, "HOA dispute. You are the registered agent on file with the state." She took the papers, looked them over, and said, "I will pass these along to our attorney." I said, "You are served. I need you to sign this." She signed the receipt copy and handed it back. I walked out feeling like I had finally done something that mattered. 2 hours later, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered and a man said, "This is Peter Rousseau. I am the attorney for the management company. I understand you filed a lawsuit." I said, "I filed a small claims complaint because the HOA is violating its own rules and retaliating against me for requesting records." He said, "I have not seen the complaint yet, but I would like to discuss a resolution before this escalates. Are you available to meet tomorrow? I said, I am leaving town in 2 days. If you want to resolve this, it needs to happen now. He said, I will review the file tonight and call you in the morning. He called at 8 a.m. the next day and said, I have reviewed your complaint and the attached evidence. I believe there are some procedural issues that need to be addressed. I would like to propose a settlement. We will rescind all fines, restore your amenities access immediately, and provide the records you requested within 5 business days. In exchange, you withdraw the complaint and we move forward with a clean slate. I said, what about the vandalism and the fake emergency declaration? He said, I cannot speak to individual board member actions, but I can assure you that the board will be reminded of its obligations under the CC and Rs and state law. If you have ongoing concerns, you can bring them to the next board meeting. I said, I want it in writing, all of it, and I want an apology from the board. He said, I can provide a written settlement agreement. I cannot guarantee an apology, but I will recommend it. I said, send me the agreement today. I will review it and let you know. He sent it 2 hours later. It was a standard settlement and release form. It said the HOA would rescind all fines, restore amenities access, provide the requested records, and agree to follow its own procedures going forward. In exchange, I would withdraw the lawsuit and release all claims. It did not mention an apology. It did not mention Julie. It was a clean exit, but it felt incomplete. I called Mark and read him the agreement. He said, take it. You are getting everything you asked for, and you are not spending months in court. If Julie keeps harassing you, you can always file again, but this gets you out of the immediate problem. I signed the agreement and sent it back. Within an hour, I got an email from the management company confirming that my amenities access had been restored and that the fines had been removed from my account. The records would be provided by the end of the week. I felt a weird mix of relief and frustration. I had won, but Julie was still out there, still on the board, still holding her clipboard and her infrared thermometer. 2 days later, I left for my family trip. I was gone for a week, helping my sister coordinate care for my mom and dealing with winter travel delays. When I got back, there was a stack of mail on my counter and an email from the management company. The email had 3 attachments. One was the board meeting minutes from January, showing no vote on a snow emergency declaration. One was a memo stating that Section 19-6 had never included a list of approved dacing products, and that the rule was considered advisory, not mandatory. The third was a log of complaints filed against my property. There was only one entry, dated February 5th, filed by Julie Kelly, alleging improper snow placement and unsafe pedestrian conditions. The complaint included a note that said, photographic evidence attached, and the photo was the one she took of the plow berm the morning she ambushed me. I read the documents twice. Everything I had suspected was confirmed. The emergency declaration did not exist. The dacing rule did not exist. The only complaint was Julie's, and it was based on a plow berm that was not my fault and that I had cleared the same day. I had been fined $800 and locked out of the amenities for a rule violation that never happened. I saved everything to my evidence folder and sent a copy to Mark. He replied, "You should forward this to the board president and demand accountability. This is fraud." I was about to do exactly that when I got a notification from the neighborhood group chat. It was a post from the board president. It said, "Effective immediately, the board is implementing a revised winter weather policy. All emergency declarations must be voted on and posted to the resident portal within 24 hours. Homeowners will have 72 hours to comply with snow removal requirements, and all fines will be subject to a mandatory review before issuance. The board is also establishing a neutral appeals process with a third-party mediator. We apologize for any confusion regarding recent enforcement actions and are committed to transparent governance going forward." The post had 20 reactions and a dozen comments, most of them thanking the board for the update. No one mentioned my name. No one mentioned Julie. But I knew exactly what had happened. The lawsuit, the records request, the state complaint, all of it had forced the board to act. They had seen the evidence, realized they were exposed, and decided to clean house before it got worse. I scrolled down and saw another post, this one from Julie. It was time-stamped 10 minutes after the board president's announcement. It said, "I am stepping down from the rules enforcement chair position effective immediately due to personal reasons. I appreciate the opportunity to serve the community and wish the board success in its continued efforts." I read it 3 times. Personal reasons. She did not apologize. She did not admit anything. She just walked away. But the result was the same. She was gone. I felt a surge of satisfaction, but I was not done yet. I still had one more card to play. A week before the showdown with the lawyer, I had done something Julie did not know about. I had filed a request with the HOA gate access system vendor for an audit log of my entry history. It took 3 days to get the file, but when it arrived, it showed something interesting. On February 7th, the day after Julie issued the first violation notice, my gate code had been manually disabled by an administrator account registered to Julie Kelly. The log showed she had blocked my access 2 days before the management company claimed my amenities were suspended for unpaid fines. She had locked me out before the fines were even formally processed. I let her call my bluff, because she did not realize I was not bluffing. I sent the audit log to the towing company that contracts with the HOA for parking enforcement and vehicle lockouts. I included a note that said, "This log shows that an HOA board member disabled my gate access without authority and prior to any valid enforcement action. I believe this constitutes misuse of vendor systems and a breach of your contract terms. I am providing this for your records, and I request that you review your relationship with this association." The towing company owner called me the next day. He said, "I reviewed the log you sent. This is a problem. We have a strict policy against board members using our systems for personal disputes. If this is accurate, we are going to suspend our contract with your HOA until we can verify that access controls are being used appropriately." I said, "It is accurate. I have the vendor documentation." He said, "I appreciate you bringing this to our attention. We will be reaching out to the management company today." 2 days later, the management company sent an email to all residents saying that the towing and gate access contract was under review and that enforcement actions were temporarily suspended pending a policy audit. The email did not mention Julie or the access log, but I knew exactly what had happened. The towing company had pulled the contract, and the HOA was scrambling to figure out how to manage the fallout. The fallout came fast. The board scheduled an emergency meeting for the following week, and the agenda included a review of enforcement procedures, vendor contracts, and board member conduct. The meeting was open to homeowners, and I made sure to attend. So did Mark, Tom, and about 15 other residents who had been fined or harassed by Julie over the past year. The meeting was held in the clubhouse community room. The board president, Richard Colborn, sat at a folding table with 2 other board members, both of whom looked uncomfortable. Julie was not there. Richard opened the meeting and said, "We are here tonight to address concerns about recent enforcement actions and to discuss changes to our policies. We have heard from several homeowners, and we take these concerns seriously." One of the other board members, a woman named Denise, said, "We want to be clear that the board did not authorize some of the actions that were taken. We are reviewing all enforcement decisions from the past 6 months, and we will be issuing corrections where appropriate." Mark stood up and said, "I would like to know if the board is aware that access codes were disabled without proper authorization and that fines were issued based on rules that do not exist in the CC&Rs. Richard shifted in his seat and said, "We are aware of those allegations, and we are investigating. We have retained an outside consultant to audit our procedures and make recommendations." I stood up and said, I have documentation showing that my gate access was disabled by a board member 2 days before the management company claimed I was suspended for unpaid fines. I also have records showing that the emergency declaration cited in my violation notice was never voted on or posted. I would like to know what the board intends to do about it." Richard said, "We are committed to corrective action. Any fines issued improperly will be rescinded, and any homeowners who were wrongly locked out will receive reimbursement for dues paid during the lockout period. We are also implementing a new appeals process with third-party mediation." Another homeowner stood up and said, "What about the board member who did this? Is there any accountability?" Denise said, "The board member in question has resigned. We are not at liberty to discuss personnel matters, but I can assure you that we are taking this seriously." The room erupted in questions. People wanted to know how long this had been going on, how many homeowners were affected, and whether there would be any financial consequences for the board. Richard tried to keep order, but the anger was palpable. People were tired of being bullied, and they wanted answers. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. By the end, the board had agreed to publish a full audit of enforcement actions, establish a resident oversight committee, and revise the winter weather policy to include clear standards and a real appeal process. It was not perfect, but it was progress. A week later, the HOA sent a correction email to all residents. It said, "The board has completed a review of recent enforcement actions and has identified several procedural errors. The following fines have been rescinded, and affected homeowners will receive refunds within 30 days. The email included a list of case numbers, including mine. It also said, "The board apologizes for any confusion or inconvenience and is committed to fair and transparent governance." The same day, I got a notification that my group chat post history had been updated. I opened the app and saw that Julie's original post about non-compliant homeowners had been removed and replaced with a correction. The correction said, "A previous post regarding snow emergency enforcement contained inaccurate information. The board did not declare a snow emergency on the dates referenced, and enforcement actions taken under that justification have been rescinded. We apologize for the error." I took a screenshot and added it to my evidence folder. It was not a personal apology, but it was public accountability, and that mattered. The final piece of the puzzle came 2 weeks later when the management company sent me a formal letter. It said, "Pursuant to your records request and the settlement agreement, the association is providing the following documents." The attached packet included the January board minutes, the complaint log, the CC&Rs section on winter maintenance, and a memo from the board attorney outlining the limits of board enforcement authority. There was also a cover letter that said, "The board has adopted a new winter policy and we encourage you to review the updated guidelines on the resident portal." I opened the portal and found the new policy. It was clear, specific, and reasonable. It said homeowners had 72 hours to clear snow after a storm, that emergency declarations required a board vote and public notice, and that all fines were subject to a mandatory review by a neutral third party before issuance. It also said that amenities lockouts could only be used for delinquent dues exceeding 90 days, and that any dispute could be appealed through binding mediation at no cost to the homeowner. It was everything I had asked for. The HOA had adopted a clear winter policy with neutral proof standards and a real appeal process. I felt a weird sense of closure. The fight was over, the rules were fixed, and Julie was gone. I had won, but it had taken weeks of documentation, phone calls, legal filings, and stress. I thought about all the people who did not have the time or resources to fight back, who just paid the fines and moved on because it was easier than dealing with the system. I thought about how close I had come to being one of them. If you are enjoying this story, please like and subscribe for more HOA drama. A month later, I was in my driveway shoveling a fresh snowfall when Tom walked over with his salt bucket. He said, "Did you see the email about the new board election?" I said, "No, what email?" He said, "Richard and Denise are stepping down. They are calling for nominations. You should run." I laughed and said, "I am not running for the HOA board." He said, "Why not? You just took down the rules enforcement chair and got the whole policy rewritten. People would vote for you." I said, "I have spent enough time dealing with this place. I just want to live here in peace." He said, "Fair enough, but if you change your mind, let me know. I will nominate you." I thanked him and went back to shoveling. I had no interest in joining the board, but the idea that people saw me as someone who could make me feel like the fight had been worth it. The next week, I got a call from the towing company owner. He said, "I wanted to follow up on that access log you sent. We completed our audit and we found multiple instances of unauthorized access changes. We have terminated our contract with your HOA and we are recommending that they implement a new vendor oversight policy." I said, "I appreciate you taking it seriously." He said, "You did us a favor. We do not want our systems used for personal vendettas. If you ever have issues with another HOA, let me know. We are always looking for people who care about accountability." I hung up and felt a small surge of satisfaction. The towing company had cut ties, the HOA was scrambling to find a new vendor, and Julie's abuse of the system had real consequences. It was not just about me anymore. The changes would help everyone. 2 months later, the snow had mostly melted and the neighborhood was starting to wake up from winter. I was checking my mail when I saw a campaign flyer in my mailbox. It was for the upcoming board election, and it featured 3 new candidates, none of whom had been on the board before. The flyer said, "Time for a change. Transparent governance. Real accountability. No more backroom deals." I smiled and tossed it on my passenger seat. The neighborhood was finally pushing back. That same week, I ran into Mark at the grocery store. He said, "Did you hear that Julie moved?" I said, "No." "Where did she go?" He said, "I do not know, but her house went up for sale last week. Someone said she is relocating out of province." I did not feel bad for her. She had spent months harassing people, inventing rules, and abusing her position. The fact that she left instead of facing consequences was probably the best outcome for everyone. She was gone, the policies were fixed, and the neighborhood had a chance to move forward. The final validation came in the form of a check. The management company sent me a reimbursement for the dues I had paid during the amenities lockout, plus a refund of the fines that had been rescinded. The total was just over $900. The cover letter said, "The board apologizes for the inconvenience and thanks you for your patience during this process." I deposited the check and felt a quiet sense of victory. It was not just about the money. It was about proving that the system could be forced to work, that documentation and persistence mattered, and that people like Julie could not win just because they had a clipboard and a title. A few weeks later, I was sitting on my front porch with a coffee, watching the last of the snow melt off the lawn. My driveway was clear, my sidewalk was dry, and my gate access worked perfectly. The neighborhood felt quieter, calmer, like a weight had been lifted. I thought about the moment Julie had thrown that reflective vest at me, the moment she had aimed her infrared thermometer at my sidewalk like a weapon, the moment she had said, "You do not get an opinion, you get a fine schedule." I thought about how powerless I had felt in that instant, and how close I had come to just paying the fines and moving on. But I had not moved on. I had fought back, gathered evidence, filed complaints, and forced the system to acknowledge that it was broken. And in the end, the system had changed. Not because the board wanted to, but because they had no choice. The HOA had adopted a clear winter policy with neutral proof standards and a real appeal process. Julie's group post had been removed and replaced with a correction. The HOA had sent a correction email retracting the smear. And I had filed a complaint to the management company that triggered discipline. Karen had called it a snow emergency, and the city notice had disproved it. I finished my coffee and stood up. The fight was over, but the lesson stuck. HOAs only have the power we give them. And when we push back with facts and documentation, they fold. It takes time, it takes effort, and it takes courage, but it works. Thanks for watching, and I appreciate you being here.